part it failed. Why? Because let's have honest discussion about technology debt, about rewrites, about refactoring. This is a topic that massively divides and creates rifts between business part of organizations and technical people. And that usually comes from not understanding each other's points, each other's values, and not speaking the same language. So the aim for this video, and that will be a long video, so make yourself a cup of tea, go to the kitchen, pause for a second, come back. The aim is to build some knowledge base with some tips, with some guidelines, how to predict those things, how to prevent unnecessary rewrites, how to address some specific scenarios. I will go through specific scenarios, and I want that to be digestible for you, whether you are a business person, which is business owner, or maybe product manager, maybe project manager, or you're a technical person, maybe you're a developer, maybe you're a junior developer who needs to see the bigger picture, learn about what's after learning to code, or maybe you're a senior architect, principal, who needs to be able to sell the idea and explain to business, or even see their point of view. Because that's where we fail as developers quite often. We don't understand you guys on the other side. I made the notes, and I would like to divide that video into 4 parts. In the first one, I will speak about reasons, about why we are doing some rewrites, why we are doing some refactoring, and maybe there are right or wrong reasons. Maybe there are reasons which, again, we can prevent or predict, we can plan ahead. Maybe there are some of them which are originating from the business, or some are purely technical. Or maybe there are some which are based purely on emotions. And usually they are not the best reasons to do anything. Then, in the next part, I'll give you a few tips for both technical and non-technical people. What to do before you start rewriting, before you come with this difficult decision that has serious costs involved. Then we'll just chill down for a little bit and walk through examples. I will use examples of projects that I was involved in and shortly give you classification, what kind of reasons were involved in those projects, how we dealt with them, what went right and what went wrong, what we should do better without hiding faults and hiding mistakes. And of course there have to be twists. There is massive rewrite coming, almost for everyone. Everyone will have to adapt, and it's starting, it's already happening, so you may have a gist of what this is going to be about. We cannot look on the rewrites or technical debt and technical terms. We need to have a wider perspective. To do that, we need to rephrase what we understand as those rewrites. So think about that as effort. That's effort, some cost, some work that has to be done. And this is balance in between this effort and either cost of future growth, because things may be more expensive in future if you don't pay it now, or the risk of a gridlock. So if you wouldn't address that today, tomorrow you may not be able to move on and grow, which may be catastrophic for your business. On the other side, it can be quite positive. This can be effort that investment today will allow you to grow faster and further in the future. So you do massive changes to allow yourself to scale. And these are 2 ways of looking on any bigger changes to the code base, which can be total rewrites or refactoring, which we usually understand as a cleaning up, reorganizing code. Let's be totally honest, 80% of businesses will never face that problem. 80% of businesses online using technology, we use SaaS platforms, we use out-of-the-box solutions. And those rewrites will be happening, of course, but they will be happening to those platforms. You wouldn't see that. From time to time, you will see something new happening. You'll be able to choose 1 of 2 versions. They'll ask you to migrate with your business to new platform. But this topic is quite specific to places or organizations which have a lot of custom technology, a lot of custom systems. So we're looking at bigger structures where there's always more red tape, more politics, more opinions. A work of development manager, head of development, principal architect, etc. is not so much about driving developers to make that move, but to gain resources, time, approval, and organize the smooth transition within organization. So there's a lot of politics involved. Whereas politics, there are emotions, and you need to know how to deal with it from both sides. You need, as a business person, you need to know how to get that necessary information about the values you care about from your technical team. But also, if you're a technical person, you need to know how to present that. Otherwise, you'll be just scaring your business counterpart. You'll be saying, oh, I need to rewrite everything. And they will think, we cannot deliver anything. We would be bankrupt in a matter of weeks. The scale will be quite important. In the bigger systems, rewrites are inevitable. They will happen. Either they will happen rapidly, usually when we do take wrong choices. If we wouldn't address things on time, then at some point we'll have to do like rapid, urgent, massive changes. Or that can be part of the process. It may happen that a huge part of your business will never even notice that. The same like with these third-party platforms. Depending how you accommodate that process, the different impact it will have on everyone. The scary or interest, like almost like chicken egg problem with that is the bigger organization is, the more complex it is, wider, more features, more products, more components. It's more likely you have more versions of your system alongside, because not everything will be fully adapted, fully migrated, fully upgraded, and this itself will create more need for another rewrite. So there is a risk you turn into never-ending cycle of starting over and over again without actually fixing the problem. So that's why you have to understand how to manage those situations, to not your situation worse, because that may happen. You may start another rewrite and another rewrite, and if you wouldn't address the initial issues, you just create another layer of complexity, which can be catastrophic. Let's be honest about that. Things can go wrong, and I saw those things almost, or actually derailing whole companies. I'll come back to that. I did some classification, some structure, thought about that, how we can divide all these reasons for doing those changes, like why developers at some point are coming to us, to you, asking about resources to rewrite. And there will be external reasons. There can be third party we're using, and this third party goes bust, they're bankrupt, and we need to find replacement. So we need to update and adapt our systems to work with it, and that will require sometimes things to stop. It may happen overnight, it may be difficult to predict, but on the other hand, there may be some things where they give us a warning. They will say, we deprecate that feature, we deprecate that API. They are sending information about that, and if we are not giving resources to our dev teams to prepare for that, then of course at some point things will stop working. You may have to halt your business. One of examples of usually predictable external reasons. There may be some trends, and trends are not always good reasons for rewrite. I will actually come back to that. It happens a lot with the frameworks, new technologies, new attractive thing that everyone is following. AI to some extent is such a thing. And there are threats. And threats are the scariest, because if there's some vulnerability in your code, someone may hurt your company, someone may steal the data. If someone steals the data, that hurts your reputation. You may be liable to massive costs. There are GDPR issues, etc. The ways to handle those, if you cannot pay that debt, which also I will come back to. Internal factors should be visible long before they actually hurt you. And the biggest one, of course, will be not regularly paying legacy debt. If you are not paying, if you are not maintaining things, if you are not updating dependencies, if you are not checking for vulnerabilities, if you are not measuring the performance of your product, then at some point it will hit you. If you are doing that regularly as a part of the process, if you give these resources to your team, you may never experience issues with that. It is quite specific to the company and tells a lot about the culture, about how the teams are managed, how the expectations are managed, how the resources are managed. Smaller company, youngest company, less experienced management, it's like startups. It's very likely that these issues like maintenance wouldn't be addressed because they'll think that's waste of time. Until the moment, they just cannot grow and the investors are unhappy, to say at least. There may be some wrong decisions which were right at some point in time, in the past. It can be technical, there may be business, maybe wrong product market fit, maybe wrong workflows for the users, not addressing their needs. But these things can be wrong initially, or maybe your circumstances has changed. And the scariest thing over here is many people in your organization will be emotionally bound to those decisions. They wouldn't admit the thing they worked so hard on is not valid anymore. And they will be stopping you from addressing that. They will say, that's the way it always was working. And you need sometimes very hard data, and you need to spend a lot of time to explain to them, sorry, that's how the things maybe used to be, but it's not now. Maybe that library was cool before, but let's say on the modern phones, our application stopped working and we cannot use that anymore. The market has changed and we need to adapt. We need to pivot. Pivots will be internal, external circumstances, but it's internal decision. Like we are changing our product, we are changing how we are addressing the market. So if you are changing the functional bit of your business, your technology usually also have to change. Sometimes not. Maybe if you have some reusable CRM, something like that, you may work with it. Usually when your offering is changing, the systems, implementations, components behind it has to take the bite. You need to bite the bullet. There may be some legally wrong decisions in the past. Now we have very specific example where something that works on the early stages on the startups may bite the company later, and addressing that wrongly can cause further issues and put a lot of risk on the company. Before I move to a more practical part, I want to focus on which of those reasons are right or wrong. Which are the good reasons to do massive changes. Let's assume we are not talking about small refactoring, we are talking about massive changes. We come and we replace big part of our application, of our system. The wrong reasons will be, for instance, about hiring. Argument we are hearing all the time, especially from people involved in digital transformation, is that there's a new framework, there's new technology coming, everyone in the market is focused on that. And that may be valid reason in the long run. And usually is. Yeah, it's easier to hire people when the market is saturated with everyone following some trend, some technology. But it's not the reason to do rapid rewrites, because even though there'll be fewer candidates for supporting this older technology, you still maybe find something. Some people will be profiting from that situation. Let's not fool ourselves. People will see, okay, there are fewer people working with Oracle those days. There are fewer people working with old versions of Java those days. There are fewer people working with Perl, Scala, C++ even. Doesn't mean we have to drop everything and rewrite to Rust, let's say, to Node. I would love to write everything in TypeScript. Amazing. Sometimes it's cheaper and more sensible in the short and mid-term to keep these things and just get some contractor, get some third-party agency to look after those things until you have actually proper reason to do rewrite. And that comes to the morale in a team. I've been in situations where my team wanted to move on, wanted to grow, but the product and technology was keeping them down, keeping them behind. And there was a risk that people would just leave company. It happened in many projects I had before. And it's so easy to address. In every company, we'll have a greenfield projects, cutting-edge projects, and we'll have some legacy projects. Split the load evenly. Give people opportunity to use new technology, learn new stuff, give them those challenges, but incorporate maintenance in her work. And this is so good because if you split that evenly, then you can keep people happy, you can keep your product running, but also you make them think about how would they approach old code base if they had to rewrite. because they're working on old stuff and they're working on new stuff. They're learning new approaches, they're seeing, they're visualizing that. And later when you decide, okay, now it's time to move on, to take this component and upgrade it, to rethink it. They have idea which is molded to shape of your business. It's not the idea from some webinar, from some presentation, from whatever pitch is given by the creators of the technology. It's their own experience. Brute force standardization is one of those reasons as well. It's nice to have things standardized, aligned to each other. It makes easier to swap resources, move people in between projects. Cool. If we're building new stuff, if we're rewriting, we should standardize things. But let's be honest, if you force standardize something for sake of standardization, something which works, which doesn't require attention, you create additional risks. You need to bring some value to that. Standardization isn't enough. Legal, and again, I'm mentioning that, and I will give you this specific example soon. Sometimes there are situations where you cannot use software you have for some legal reasons. And usually there are 2 ways out of it. You can either take some legal actions, which costs. You can pay to have rights, that costs. And you can rewrite. And people are forgetting that rewriting costs as well. And usually costs more than previous 2 options. Whenever you can, and makes sense, to pay to get ownership and ability to use something you're already using, to take it further, it's just easier to pay. Because if you decide to wipe the table clean, probably you pay more. In there, it hurts. I will never do that again. If I can afford, of course. And then we have things about ownership. Ownership is on one side, when we think about ownership by the teams, by dev teams, it's quite similar to this standardization, moral thing. If some project is being inherited by other team, they usually like to do things their way. The thing is, if you're taking something over, you should take it with whole inventory. It means that you need to be able to maintain things as it is. Before you rewrite it, you still need to be able to maintain. The fact that you are taking ownership of that is not enough. It's not enough to delete everything. And there are some people, just a lot of managers, and I'll give you ways how to avoid it in the next part. But there are people coming to companies. Usually someone hires manager, like some principal engineer, principal architect. They're coming to company and saying, from today, that's the way we're gonna do that. And it makes no sense, absolutely no sense, because they don't understand the business. They just have some opinions. That's not the right way. Probably the biggest fail I ever seen, when company is stuck to ownership of things that aren't their primary product. Investing time in building frameworks, components that can be taken out of box. Sometimes they're free, but they can be bought from companies which actually are creating those technologies. And those companies are decided to build those components in-house instead. We're rewriting everything to have it in-house. If there is no cost benefit, if there is no ability to scale, like actually if you cannot create own product from that, it's not worth it. Maybe it will help you to save some money, but you are not able to use benefit of scale if you're not selling that. Every vendor building technology will give you better price because they will have many customers for that technology. If your only customer is inside your organization, it wouldn't just make sense financially. There are situations where you have this custom software, but in many cases it will be just cheaper, just easier to use something else and focus on actually the thing you are delivering, what is your USP, what you're offering to the market. Developers would like to write those things, like we like challenges, but in the end of the day, company has to make money, and that's also developer teams need to understand that. If we focus on building on framework and we are not selling that framework, courses from that framework, we are not making conventions about that framework, that's not our product. That will be our cost, but we will be just throwing money out to the wind. I've seen that many times. And are there good reasons? How do you think? Are there good reasons to rewrite? Vendor lock? Let me go. I mentioned already third parties going bust, but there may be cases where third party is making massive change. They made own rewrite. And you cannot keep upgrading because you wouldn't get security fixes, for instance, without changing your code base. That happens a lot. You need to plan for that, but you will see that advance. You will see that coming. But it's very good reason to do that. So let's say Java is famous for that. No, not so many, but React is famous for that. We are seeing the vendor is preparing next release, it's coming. We need to put in calendar. That's the moment when we will spend some resources to ensure everything is working, everything is building. This way we avoid surprise. There will be very good reason to rewrite those bits that doesn't work anymore, are not fit for this purpose. Maybe rethink, maybe we can find some third party that will be doing exactly the same thing. Only thing I would like you to remember that maybe there is some alternative way to solve the problem. So I've been a few times in a case that it was quite difficult and quite challenging and expensive to change one component somewhere deep in the system. And there was a risk that if someone's get access to that component, they will be able to use some exploits, vulnerabilities, to abuse that system. And the first thought is, yeah, let's rewrite it. But what about fencing? What about building a wall around that feature? If it's internal component, not accessible for outside world, it is possible to use things in infrastructure, in networking, using things like VPNs, like virtual private clouds, virtual private networks, VPNs, to put some defenses in front of such features and delay paying legacy debt over there. The upside of that is at some point you will do that, but you're not forced to do it urgently. You are buying yourself time to do that. And if someone wants to use those vulnerabilities, they'll have to crack all the other securities you have in place. And if you think like from insurance point of view, if you explain that this is the way you're mitigating risks, they'll be fine with that. As long as you are doing that, if you are not addressing, you keep this vulnerable part of the code there without beefing up defenses, forget about your insurance. They wouldn't like to do anything with you. If something happens, if someone steals your data, GDPR, that's your problem. But if you put that walls, that will be fine. Effort is very good reason. What I mean by that? If you are building thing over and over again in the same way, it's worth, and I will give a very good example of that later, it's worth to just stop at this point, come back to the table and say what we can white label, what we can do as a core reusable thing, and run it from the scratch with this capacity. From this moment, you can focus actually on only things that differ, and that creates massive benefit of scale. I see that in practice. I'll give you examples. Standardization, again, may be good reason for the long term. If you are learning to be able to reuse your resources, and there are things not fit for purpose anymore. If you see some things not being used, not working in a way that is what you mean anymore, I will tell you later how to measure, how to observe things which are not usable. That code which only wastes your resources. If you find those places, if you find these things, it's worth to go over there, rewrite, clean out this waste, and spend time on things that actually matter. Good reason, again, with legal, rewriting things where you cannot buy things, when you cannot buy rights, when you cannot resolve things in legal matter. Sometimes you have to go. You have to do right, because if you wouldn't do that and someone finds out you are in a breach of license, that can cost you more. If you know about that, you should be addressing that as soon as possible. Talk to your legal department. They will help you. And complexity. Complexity will be the main reason for any bigger rewrites. Because, as we mentioned before, your system is getting bigger. Your system is being more complex, so it's more difficult to maintain that. You need more specialized knowledge. People across the organization have knowledge about just elements. No one has ability to see the bigger picture. If you're running into that situation, you need to go and see what we can simplify. Can we reuse things? Can we clean up? That's a good reason. Again, not for urgent rewrites, but for those planned and done properly, step by step. Let's go more practical. We know we need to do rewrite. We know we have technology debt and we want to address it. I mentioned already that there will be people who just come over here to the organization and say, yeah, we stopped doing that this way. We are now sitting and building everything from scratch this way. Maybe in small startups, maybe good thing. If you already delivered MVP and you need to grow and you cannot, but usually that wouldn't work. You need to get familiar with a product. You need to get familiar with the business. You need to understand what problems the product business USP is solving. What's the core value you are delivering? If you don't know that, how are you gonna rewrite things, how are you gonna refactor things without damaging the business? If you don't know what are the main KPIs for the business, how are you gonna do that? And I've been in a place where those information weren't presented to me, and I would make far better choices if I knew them at the time. It's so crucial. It's so crucial to go and understand your business counterpart. And if you are the business counterpart, it is very important to whoever comes to your team to do a cleanup, to improve the performance, maintenance of your technology. They need to understand what's your situation in terms of resourcing, what's your USP, what are your limitations in terms of what are your commitments, how you measure success in the business terms, your sales, your leads. They need to be up to date with that. Without that, they're making blind choice and they're very likely to hurt your business. Simple like that. Transparency in the business, that's the only way. More you hide, more you have a politics in between departments, your business will suffer. Simple. Whichever part of business you represent, you need to establish metrics. If you're not measuring your sales, if you're not measuring your visits, your funnels, your registration, subscription, if you're not measuring journeys of your users, if you're not measuring performance of systems, usage of systems, if you're not measuring, from technical terms, memory usage, storage usage, traffic, like bandwidth, which everything relates to the costs. If you're not measuring these things, you need to start doing that. You need to go and establish all the things which represent either costs or profits in company. Because how are you gonna judge the success of rewrite? Again, it wouldn't make sense to rewrite for the sake of rewrite. You want to see improvement. Either way, either stop spending so much money or start earning more money. I think it's no-brainer. Tell me it was a shock for you. Think about alternative solutions. Think if you can find third party doing the same job as this part you are willing to rewrite. Think if there is any shortcut. It's easier to take 80% of a third party. Think about open source. That's open source. You can take open source project which is solving 80% of your needs and build remaining 20%. That's how people are using WordPress, which is how much developers don't like that technology. WordPress is still running most of the internet. 80% of something. Why? Because it gives 80% of features, and then there are other people who are adding remaining 10% as a templates, 5% as a plugins, some extensions. There's a market for that, and then maybe remaining 5% for your custom templates and extensions, functionalities, integrations. Most people aren't building that from scratch. Who is building alternatives to WordPress? There are other companies who are also selling authoring software. Simple. You have cases where similar systems will be built in-house, but they will be built by massive organizations which have very specific need for that. They will benefit from having that tailored for the needs, but they will also have massive limitation because they are on the top of the market. Hardly anyone will be actually using that thing they built in-house. So it's very unlikely they will sell it. Even if you think about Google, Meta, they give us a lot of technology we can reuse, like React. They will have a lot of other technology that is only for them because it's only sensible to use and it's tailored for their scale. It's not tailored for your eShop. You wouldn't need the complexity and the cost. And once you have metrics, once you know about possible workarounds, you need to find the value and piggyback on the value. And it's funny because you can do it two ways. Either you piggyback on new features, new improvements. So let's say we need to rewrite that bit to deliver you ABC. And ABC is a value for business. Your rewrite is a pre-requirement component of that change. To deliver that, you need to invest a bit more time. You cannot build on wobbly foundations. Described this way, that before we were building small houses on our playground, but now we need to build skyscrapers. So we need to do proper foundation piling, otherwise our skyscrapers will just fall. People will understand that. Non-technical people will get that idea. You have to just be clear about this cost. How much it costs to build new thing. The same, you can add features to rewrite to create the value. So imagine you have a system that it's very difficult to maintain because it's using old technology, and you want to rewrite so you can spend less time on maintenance and make it easier to build new stuff. But sometimes you wouldn't have a request to build new stuff yet. You can observe where your users struggle, where your business is struggling, what kind of workflow is not efficient. If you come from offering that if you guys agree that we spend X resources on cleaning up this, you don't have to say we're cleaning up this, but thanks to that, we'll give you this and this. So that means we can scale our operations. Perfect. You know your background. You know how to measure. You gave the value. Now, you need to prepare to slowly roll your changes. And slow rolling, in terms of refactoring and rewrites, will be happening in two ways. One will be about adaptation. What you want to do, and it's relatively possible with most of technology. You don't want to give new version to everyone at once, because you don't know what the bugs will be involved. You don't know if that will deliver. You don't know about any unknowns over there. You want to measure that. You want to measure whole transition, and you want to be able to roll back. To do that, you can slow roll that. If you are building applications for mobile devices, platforms usually give you that possibility. You can deliver new version to 10% of your user base. If you are building websites, you can also split versions in between number of traffic. If you cannot do that, technically, your technology doesn't allow you easily to say that, let's say, this portion of your user base is using new version. You can do that by informing users directly. So imagine your organization is bigger. They're using different part of your system. And you have one team, which is more tech savvy, more excited about things, or being frank about that, maybe this team is abandoned by everyone. Maybe no one thinks about the needs and no one involves them. If you can start with them and say, guys, we want to clean up everything, we want to improve your work, and we'll start with you guys, they may be excited because someone remembers about them, and because they'll be excited, because they'll be seen, they'll be far more honest with the feedback. They'll be far more involved, and then later they'll help you solve that. Probably there will be even lower risks if everyone forgets about it. There will be lower risks involved. You deliver with them, they're happy. Other departments are seeing that, and they want the same. That usually happens. In the beginning, no one wants the change. Once someone gets a new thing, everyone starts to change. You need to do that step by step. The following thing, which is kind of connected. You need to remove all the waste from your way, all the obstacles. And waste and obstacles usually will be opinions, will be emotions, will be people stuck to your ways. And again, if you are dividing that, if you are targeting your change toward more receptive people, that will force everyone else to follow. You need to plan in a way that there is bottleneck, and you cannot tackle that bottleneck in your organization. You need to use the rest of the organization to help you. Use the mass, use the volume, use the scale to push things through. And the last thing, think if a rewrite is necessary. Because instead of rewrite, you may do migration. You may find third party doing exactly the same thing that your custom systems are doing. And moving to the third party will be quite similar. You want to measure success, you want to slow roll that. But you may not have to spend so much resources. And developers who hate it, sorry, developers wouldn't feel safe because they are not maintaining the thing. But the way how technology is changing is that we'll have more third-party services. AI will be one of those things, and we'll have more people who operate those systems rather than build them. Even development itself will look this way. I'll come back to that on the end. Okay, now examples, and I don't want to bore you to death, so I'm gonna do it quickly. First example is when, together with my brother, we were maintaining software which was dedicated for local transport company. We had to look if people are not stealing fuel from the buses, so there was mostly like database thing built on Clipper, DOS, text-based, etc. some new management came to the company and decided that they wanted to have new accounting software. And that's fair play, that's the grant, but they brute forced that. They brute forced that, making a lot of people not very happy. It was quite tough. Anyhow, we had to rewrite our bit so it could work with their system. And we took approach, because we're a smaller player and we had to be careful, so we took approach that we'll sit together with the users and learn about their ways. And we replicated things like the pattern of them using the keyboard, all the workflows they were familiar with, and they had to adapt, but they liked it, they loved it. And years later, when we went away, we moved our ways, and the second party forced another system, out of the box third party. Again, brute forcing that. People hated that. And I'm still referring to our approach as a far better. Good example that if you are learning about the business and the workflows, rewriting and adaptation will go much smoother and you have less obstacles. Then I was still a junior developer. I moved to a startup which was competing in early years with Facebook and MySpace. That was beginning of big .coms era. JavaScript was still not very mature, not many frameworks organizing things, and our code had to support various browsers. You had Internet Explorer, you had Opera, you had Mozilla. Everything was working in a different way, and the code was a mess. So I took on the path and the task to standardize. I found some out-of-the-box solution, and I sat down with all my colleagues and explained to them and presented to them, and we slowly unrolled that. What we achieved this way? By standardizing step by step, we limited effort they have to do in the future to maintain that. And this library we used there was used for many years to come. To the moment almost they were acquired, they changed whole branding, they rebuilt whole product, and all of that. They were actually making bigger changes. Then I moved to one of the biggest hardware companies, which was at the time the best when it comes to their niche. But they were a hardware company. And they already had one failed operating system, which was losing battle with iPhones, iOS, with Android from Google. And they decided to make another operating system. And we were building that. It was an amazing project to build in. But it failed. Why? Because it was trying to play on the ground they weren't familiar with. They were a hardware company, not a software company. And they could just onboard ready solutions over them and right away they'll be in place where Samsung is today. But they decided to not, and to be honest, if you check latest news and you connect the dots, you can see which company was bought by another big software company. It happens. I moved to gaming industry and we were building some browser-based games which were for marketing campaigns for different vendors which were promoting their things, their products. But the games were very similar to each other. So my brilliant boss took me and gave me a task to start from scratch, but build it in a way that can be white labeled. And that's what I did. I built engines for those games where artists can just take over skin, add some layers, add some levels, add some music, and throw to next client. And this way they save an amazing amount of effort. And some of those games were quite big, and the brands different than ours because that was for the client. They were massive. And thanks to this experience, I was able to take one of the biggest managerial roles I had. And we had to migrate from the software, from the code we did not own. So the company hired some agency to build the first product. And once they started operating, earning money, they decided to have own developer team. And this agency owned the rights to the code, so the decision was to rewrite everything. It was difficult. It's difficult to rewrite one-to-one, It took a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of stress. We did it. It was successful. Just to face another rewrite once we were about to be acquired and merged with a new company. We had to change many things. It was easier than the first approach. But the problem was, and that was admitted by everyone, including the owners of company, that if we knew that there was an option to buy the license, we should go for that, because that will be cheaper, and in most cases it is. That's a perfect example where even good, well-executed rewrite is not always the best path, not the best choice. After that, I played with few startups, and startups are always starting with total mess. So the main thing over there was we had to come and organize everything, standardize everything. So again, we try to understand the project, understand the product, and the build. And it worked in the beginning, but where it started failing and why sometimes we had to abandon those projects was, instead of building strong foundations and focusing on the main product, main USP that the business was delivering, owners of these early companies are often creating kitchen sink requirements. They want everything. They want on scale of Google. And that never works. That creates scope creep. You cannot deliver that. Everyone is unhappy. Sometimes you have to pair their ways. And then I was able to use experience with games, with creating something reusable. So an agency that was creating CMSs for specific brands, which very different to normal WordPress, etc. We took some projects and we unified that under one core. It was very powerful, it was very flexible, it actually made difference, it was sensible from technical point of view, but they underappreciate the scale of the niche, and they figure out quite fast that there are not enough clients to sell that. So while the project was successful and was delivering, in the end the agency came back to WordPress. The last startup I worked with was building something very ambitious that was kind of communicated for business. A lot of cool features, some patents around that, amazing. And again, like many startups, it started with mess. And mess also came from sales, selling something that did not exist. And the developer team had to build on top of it. So one of the first things, again, was to separate everything, to clean up, to standardize, to measure, to learn that at some point, again, sales pivoted massively, and we found the technology we were using, I think there was Angular point, Angular 2, wasn't fit for purpose, and we had to migrate, and migration involved training the team. It was interesting from this point of view that actually it was easy to rebuild everything, but also to boost morale of the team, where working in startups is extremely stressful, but by offering to the team the chance to upscale, to learn new skills, learn new framework, we pumped a lot of energy to them and made them deliver that. Landing on a big project requires understanding the client, requires understanding the dependencies, the business, the history, all people involved, metrics, and making experiments. And that's the way I approach rewrites from now. We try to find small elements of a system. We try to find a way to build it in a way that was proven so far as reliable, as standardized. We make experiment, we deliver that in slow, raw way. We take feedback, we correct based on feedback, and then we slowly deprecate always. And then we iterate, and in the end, most of the system is being rewritten. Some rewrites will take months, not weeks, months. Some will take years, but some will never end. And we must be aware that the next massive rewrite is coming. And this rewrite will be connected to the biggest trend of our days, which is AI, of course. Everyone is afraid that they will be replaced by developers, managers, testers, and AI in some way will replace existing code, existing solutions. So it will be one of the massive reasons and massive events triggering rewrite. But it's not necessarily cannot be so terrifying. Look on history. When we started programming, the first programs were assembly, even like, these dotted cards. People had to understand how computers are working inside. Then, with more abstraction, we had languages like C, C++, where you still had to manage memory, CPU, but you could organize your code in more meaningful human-like way. And then we iterated to more abstraction and so forth. Nowadays we have Java, we have .NET, we have JavaScript and Python, where you are thinking more about the behavior, the business logic you're delivering, but not about those technicalities. And moving towards AI is exactly the same. AI will be just another iteration, another step in evolution of programming languages. Now we have prompt engineers. So there are still engineers who need to know how to build the questions or directives to AI, because AI, it may sound like it's creative, but it's not. AI nowadays and for foreseeable future is just beefed up statistics, regression, everything we had so far in analytics. And that's where probably AI will meet you first. Things like testing, things like analytics, things like helping you to not repeat yourself. We are using already AI in programming, of course. We're using GitHub Copilot. What it does, it doesn't write whole code for us, no way. It helps us refactor. It analyzes the code we are writing, but it's just suggesting. And quite often, we had to correct all the suggestions. They'll be 80% correct. Remember 80-20? We still need to be there. We still need to help AI to make the right decisions. Prepare. Prepare your budgets. If you're a business person, prepare your budget that your team will have to go learn about AI, how to use AI in your business to help you grow, to help you be relevant on the market, to make you informed, to help you gather and analyze all this data that is flowing now, hopefully to your business. Plan as for any other technological debt. It's coming. And if you really think that there's nothing to do, if you really think you made everything, your developers deployed everything, you're happy, your clients are getting what they want. If you really think that's true, that's video for you.